How's it going?
It's going okay. I'm in London, so it's like almost midnight.
Nice.
Um,
It's been an interesting couple days in crypto. Almost forgot
I mean,
almost forgot we had a big future prop for Adam going on right now.
I mean, these are truly unprecedented times in crypto. Um, I was just talking earlier tonight about to the Psalm team about, um, you know, I've been in crypto since 2013, 2014. Certainly remember the Mt. Gox collapse, though I never used Mt. Gox or made an account or did anything with it. But it was just around that time I was getting into crypto. I feel like this is worse. Like
Yeah,
it's
no,
just, it is,
this is not just like everything that they had their fingers in with all their money. It's like, he was like the head of, he was like the face of crypto there for a little while as far as like people in the mainstream. He was going in front of Congress and just everything. So yeah, this is bad, really bad.
I mean, but at the other hand, it is just like a huge validation, I guess, of the work, right? Of like, why do we build DeFi? Why do we need to build, like, it's like, I don't know. It's like um, the path that FTX and SBF took, seemed like the easy path. Like, oh, build a centralized thing, you know,
Yeah,
just like be as aggressive as possible, build a centralized thing. Sure, you have to leave the United States for a while,
yeah,
but like,
yeah,
you become emperor for doing that.
yeah.
Um, and
But
you
it's
know,
just
I
staggering how quickly they built up what they did, and just how quickly they dominated everything, and then just all of a sudden,
well, if you have a $10 billion hole in your books,
yeah,
the speed suddenly makes is no longer, you know,
yeah,
that would be a super challenging thing to accomplish without fraud, but
right.
it is not. It is definitely a viable thing with fraud.
Ugh.
I think the thing that like disappoints me the most is like how like simultaneously blatant like the strategy was, like let's lobby against like DeFi, and like let's make it like harder to like have some sense of like on-chain transparency and like kind of like accountability, that's on chain and visible to the public, and instead let's like do these like shady things on the back end, and then here it is, like everything's kind of coming out in public, of how transparent everything was, and this like lobbying strategy, and it's sort of like, wow, everyone fell for it. And like the lobbyists will probably take their side eventually, and also go against DeFi and like more crypto native people. So it's sort of like he lost, but it's like his political aims are probably going to be, on some level, he's going to win. So anyways, he screwed us both ways, politically and also economically.
Yeah, my bags aren't feeling so good today. All right. So the whole idea on here, we want to talk about what's been going on with Prop 82 and what where we're going after this next week is up, right?
Yeah, we were just chatting this evening, and I think there's a lot of like there's different ways that this is going to shake out, right? Obviously, voting hasn't ended, and like encourage everyone, go out and vote, and make sure there's like, um, people are actually participating. Like a high voter turnout is important, but like the way this shakes out, I think is still to be determined, right? Like it could pass, it could not pass. What happens in either scenario? I think like a lot of people, in this like camp. I don't like to call it a camp, but like let's say people that have been like supportive of Adam 2.0, they realize there are things that need to be changed, right? Like we were talking a lot about the issuance piece, and should there be a higher community tax instead of having mints of atoms in these like large tranches. I feel like that's like a really great idea. Obviously, that's not what's proposed right now in Prop 82, but even if it passes, I feel like that's something that we can absolutely propose and then amend, let's say, the original, the kind of the original, let's say 1.0 or whatever version of the white paper. So it's sort of like the way this is going to shake out is not either like, it's not a binary, either it like fails and everything kind of like gets thrown out, or like it passes and like everything gets everything like shakes out perfectly. I mean, this was never intended to be a vision execution plan anyways. So yeah, multiple paths forward.
It's so I mean, like, I think I don't know. I don't think that we intended to come at this proposal with like a lobbying campaign. We intended to come at this proposal with like an intention getting campaign. And that was the intention of Atom 2.0 at Cosmoverse, was trying to get the community's attention and to get the community's attention focused back to bring their attention back to Atom, where I feel like Atom has lost that attention. I think it's really unfortunate that there has become like this like two-sided lobbying campaign around this, because it sort of distorts what has always been my intent, which was I want to gather information from stakeholders in Cosmos about what it is to what do they want Atom to be. If you're a validator, if you're an Atom holder, like that was the whole point of putting up a signaling proposition. It would have been, it's totally an acceptable outcome for it to be yes, no with veto. And no matter what those outcomes, whether or not it's yes or it's no with veto, it's like the process doesn't stop here unless we all just have decided that we're content to let the Atom fail and the Atom status quo sort of collapse. So that's always been the goal here. And I don't think that there's I don't think a yes vote, because like it's like, okay, if you have a yes vote, I'm sure every single person who has a yes vote has some misgivings or concerns or differing points of view, or thinks that parts of the Atom 2.0 vision have to be elaborated. And I think every single person who votes no or abstain or no with veto has parts of Atom 2.0 that they think are really important to the future of Cosmos. And so the point of all of this stuff is to have, a sequence, a process of proposals that are eventually going to result in a shared common vision about what this network can be, what this blockchain in the Cosmos ecosystem is meant to be, and how it's going to work. And some of those proposals, there are going to be proposals that also, unlike this one, which doesn't do anything, it's not like it passes and tomorrow there are 4 million more atoms in the community pool. There are going to be proposals that change parameters. There are going to be proposals that go into software upgrades. And I think the nature of this beast is that if Atom is really going to be a great asset, there needs to be a more intense politics around it. But that politics needs to be civil and constructive. Otherwise, we're all just going to be better off forking off into our own little chains, as Tenderbit's call to arms document sort of describes.
Yep. Yeah, I think
Jahan, I'm bringing you online.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah,
I think. Oh, sorry. No, I was just gonna say, like, in spite of the fact that it might seem like there's factions, which I guess there kind of is. Ultimately, I think more than anything, you could say that people are interested in the allocator and scheduler and an attempt at trying to create a sustainable revenue. Really, the big issue has been how it's funded, where it's funded to, the various rights and what have you of the community and stuff. So it's really not that far away. It's just a matter of how how it's handled after this point and how everybody agrees on these other pain points, that kind of thing. So
Yeah. Like one thing I'll say that I think that I've been reflecting on a lot today in particular is we need to I think like be a little bit more like I don't know, maybe like gracious in some sense because a lot of the discourse around like these different ideas and like ways to amend the proposal and like criticisms but also definitely like in support as well of the white paper has been very much like this is a good idea and like this is a bad idea like realistically there's a lot of nuance realistically like this is going to take time to evolve realistically there could be there are risks with some of the things proposed in the paper and these will take time to figure out and there'll be additional analysis and we'll have like researchers kind of figuring out like the best way to prevent liquid staking from becoming a risk to atom holders like as an example. So it's not like we shouldn't be thinking of these ideas as like a one and done or like a binary outcome like this is good or this is bad because I feel like that just leads to division and you've kind of like seen that thinking play out with in the larger discourse because it's become this like us versus them and like that is at any point like in any kind of socio-political like kind of system or in any kind of narrative like that's the point at which things break down right like us versus them divisions you're bad you're good I'm the hero you're the anti you're the villain it's a tale as old as time and I feel like seeing it play out in real time has definitely been like personally quite intellectually interesting but also like emotionally draining. So like when Zachy put together the spaces he was like, oh, what should we call it? I was like, how about like paths forward because like that's that's a plural, there's multiple paths, it's not one path. So to kind of like keep suggesting that this is the best idea and that's the worst idea and it's just like it's just bad, like it's just bad culture.
I would also say it's Jahan. It's there's actually a huge overlap. I think between everyone. That overlap is that people want to see funding for new projects, development, other things coming from inflation, and there are a lot of details about the mechanism and stuff. But I think that's a really big point of broad agreement, and I think it's awesome that we're all on the same page that much.
Yeah, and I mean, like, speaking of like nuance discussion as well, like I am curious, like from folks here, like that joined the Twitter Spaces this evening, like, yeah, like what are the paths forward that you would like to see, right? Like, what do these like however you might have voted, like what does that vote like substantively like mean for you? Okay, let's say you voted, uh, you voted no. Okay, great, like that's fine. What do you want to see? Does that mean we like these are the things like I feel like the voting system itself is a little bit flawed because obviously yes no these are binary outcomes but let's like have the discussion I feel like as a community and like support just great ideas no matter where they come from and have them be implemented by people that are able to do so.
Hey guys, hey, so I'm overall in support for Prop 82, but I think that we can probably revise that and maybe simplify the clear path moving forward because the white paper that originally was proposed to regular people, nobody's gonna read that long paper, right? So we need like a light paper version so people can have a clear understanding of like what you're trying to implement. And regarding the minting of the 4 million atom, and I think this is something that we could probably have to work on because we're basically in uncharted waters here, and we've seen how money management can go from centralized companies, right? Hedge funds, FTX, et cetera, and even leveraging, such as the liquid staking. So we need to have some like measures, like backstop measures, to not over leverage ourselves. But yeah, what do you guys think?
So I think that the question is that there are a couple of different questions that are. It's like, so it's interesting to me that that there seems to be that there's a feeling among many cosmonauts that adjusting the government's parameter of the tax rate and adjusting the governance parameter of the minimum inflation is somehow a less disruptive change than minting new coins. I think there are I don't know. I think there's prior art on responsibly minting of new coins to further the project. I think one of the best examples is when Yearn did it. And it's not like Yearn has turned into like some sort of endless money printer. Instead, it is continued to responsibly mint coins to improve alignment between contributors and the project and continue to grow the project. It's maybe not clear whether or not Yearn's business model is going to keep, works well as the market has changed. But that's a perfectly good example of a project that has, kept a limit on its supply, and that a governance vote to mint new coins is not, sort of undermine the full project. But if there's I think that I do think that I think like part of my sort of what was appealing to me about the directions that we've taken in Atom 2.0 was from a monetary policy. I don't believe it was kicking the can down the road. It was saying, hey, here's a monetary policy. It's probably 2x larger, or maybe, 2x larger at least, if not more, even further, then we probably need to get the job done. But it really, it's credible in the sense of, hey, it doesn't say let's, keep figuring out the monetary policy forever. That was kind of like, part of the effort of what I liked about, both the original version of the mint, where the 55 million Atom mint into the treasury, and then the updated now tranche system. Now, I think if we do if I were what I was going to say was the tranche system is so I think going to the sort of tax system is a bit of more of a kick the can down the road kind of strategy, where it's like, okay, we can definitely get to the early stages of Treasury DAOs and the early stages of evolving the community fund into something that is a more effective allocator of capital than the current system. We can definitely fund development of new utilities for Atom, like the scheduler or the allocator ideas, if the community wants to go forward with building a scheduler and an allocator. Those things are doable within the tax system, but they definitely, it also leaves scaling the system, should it work, quite a bit up to future Atom holders and future builders to figure out, which is somewhat different from what the current Atom 2.0 does, but it's not that is not offensive, and continuing to cryptocurrencies are constantly a work in progress, we learned a lot about multi-chain ecosystems and maintaining alignment between different parts of the system over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. That gave rise to the allocator and the scheduler idea, and I'm sure new ideas will come up as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I really actually do like the kind of simplicity and kind of reliability of something like increasing the community pool tax. So instead of doing these tranches of minting, it's predictable, it's reliable. It actually also minimizes the need for governance. So I mean, there has been a little bit of inconsistencies, I would say, with kind of folks that are well, there's potentially kind of problems with governance or kind of risks of takeover with these mints, right? Going to these sub DAOs. I mean, regardless whether there's a community pool tax or mints, there will be those governance challenges with the sub DAOs, right? Because the idea would be that, I mean, from what I've understood from the folks that had proposed the issuance idea, and I don't know if there's anyone in here that wants to speak to it. The idea is you would have this tax, this increased tax, so more funds in the community pool, and then you could take a portion of that, probably create some sort of proposal, some sort of framework for what that would go towards in a sub DAO, allocate it to a sub DAO, and then you would be able to use those funds that way. Which is great. I mean, it accomplishes the exact same thing, right? It's just a different mechanism. So, I mean, again, there is a lot of overlap, and I mean, it's great that these things are happening and that we're having these discussions.
Yeah, I'm of the proposed tax rather than minting. And have you guys done any calculations on how much revenue you would get from the scheduler, and then with potentially future interchain security chains onboarding? Could that not be enough to slowly build up the treasury over time as Cosmos grows? And also, being a Cosmos hub, which there really isn't any DeFi on the chain, how much revenue can you really get from MEV? I'm not an expert in it, but I'm just curious because, compared to layer 1 smart contract, it's a completely different situation.
Okay. These are very Jahan questions, if Jahan wants to answer them. I have many opinions about the expected revenue from the scheduler thing. But Jahan also has opinions about those. So you want to?
Yeah, I actually, I don't really know what the revenue is going to be from the scheduler. I guess it's I think it will be considerable, but we haven't really had a very good framework to do the calculations on. I do think that MEV is kind of it is this successor to the gas systems that we have on blockchain. So I think that most gas will go through MEV systems in the future. So I think being at the center of that could be really important. But in terms of the overall big picture of where does money get spent from, I think that spending money from inflation, whether it's from explicit minting tranches or from an increased community tax, which also comes from inflation, is a good thing for us to do right now because we are in a growth phase. And I think right now it's still about investing in the future. And the Cosmos Hub, it is 3 years old. And, a three-year-old startup is still going to be, it's probably going to be, spending VC money for a centralized thing. So I think that's where we're at. And there's if you can invest capital ahead of time and put it to work, you can make it much bigger in the future versus having to stick to, strictly to the cash flow. And spending money from the community tax or from minting tranches is that type of investment.
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit about the transaction fees that would come from interchain security. So also kind of just speaking about interchain security, we did have another project announced today. All the days are blurring a little bit, but Duality is the latest consumer chain to come to signaling their intention to be using interchain security and coming to the Cosmos Hub. So they're an interesting DEX, AMM. They offer like no slippage, like stable swaps and all these crazy things. So anywho, I do encourage people to check them out. But the reason I bring them up is because obviously a lot of discussions around this proposal has been inherently also been around like in some sense like interchain security. And so like for example, like a common criticism was, well, why can't we wait, right? Like see what the fees look like from interchain security, what the adoption looks like, and then we can figure out a kind of a funding mechanism, or like how to structure these DAOs, or even issuance, or community taxes, or what have you. We can kind of talk about that later. So I think that's like a fair kind of point, but I think it is also important to be like realistic about what like interchain security will look like in the short term. So I'll break it down briefly. So first of all, we do have seven, I believe it's 7 projects, right, that have confirmed to sort of, well, that have confirmed their intention to launch. So obviously, governance and actually getting them onboarded, this will take months, and we'll be starting in early 2023, which is very exciting. But in the meantime, consider that the average transaction cost on the hub is quite small, right? Like that's kind of the beauty of Cosmos. It's like 0.025 atoms or something like this. So we're going to need like a lot of usage, a lot of like volume, a lot of transaction volume for like a lot of that to kind of go back to stakers like in a meaningful amount, right? So and 100% of those fees won't necessarily go to stakers, right? Like there is going to be like various like breakdowns depending on like the nature of the project and like what passes through governance. So like there's this default 25-75 split, so already that's a quarter of fees going to stakers, so not 100%. And if it's 0.025 atoms, that's quite small, right? So we're looking at millions of transactions, like tens of millions to kind of like be meaningful.
I would also add that that's going to include, it really depends on the consumer chain. Obviously it can be configured per chain. It's up to governance to approve that. If they don't like the deal, they can get a different deal. But most chains are also planning to also give 25% of their own inflation that goes to their token holders to the hub as well. So that needs to be factored into, which would be more significant.
And it's not to say that ICS isn't going to be a game changer from like a fees perspective. Like it absolutely is, but this is like a very much like a long-term thing, right? Like again, like there is going to be like a thoughtful sort of like progressive rollout of like chains coming online, especially like with this permission sort of governance gated process. There will be permissionless deployment in the future. Like that's something Informal is kind of specking out and researching. Eventually we'll be building. Jahan can speak more to that process, but it's just to say that in the short term, like there's going to have to be like sort of like added like investment and focus on like how we sort of like scale the hub's like capabilities in other ways, right? And part of that is like funding development for these like core kind of pieces like the scheduler and things like this. So it like this is all very progressive, right? And like there is no perfect plan and anyone that like proposes a perfect plan I think is being deceptive, to be honest. Like these are very nuanced, like things change constantly. Like we've had 2 major blowups in like 1 year, like already, just generally like in the ecosystem. Today was one the second one. So we can't anticipate black swan events, we can't anticipate everything, but I think what we can do is like be reasonable, thoughtful, methodical, have like sort of like kind of people and like teams like ready to like take on these tasks, and then obviously like a community that's like willing to like support and like sustain this thing in the long run. So anyways, I'll stop talking.
I want to add really quickly that the with the treasury DAOs, they're not going to be perfect to start. We have to figure out what the right governance system is. I mean, there's so many different possible governance systems out there, and I think what I really want to see though is to start having the intention to do them and start, putting a little bit of money. I mean, obviously a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, a little bit of money into them to start testing them out, so that we can get to a place where in 4 or 5 years, it is possible to, run all these projects through the Treasury DAO system. But to do that, we have to get started, and we have to allocate some funds towards it, whether it is a initial, small increase in the community tax or an initial small, tranche of minting. Both those things get us running, with the Treasury DAOs.
My biggest concern is just that we're not at that stage that we can really leverage the risk of minting millions of atoms, even though we're looking at growth. I think we have to kind of like go by the data and see how how interchain security works, how MEV works, the fees generated, and then what we need to bootstrap and grow the ecosystem more. And another issue that I keep having is the liquid staking module, where we have Stride, we'll have Quicksilver, we'll have Lido. Why not leverage them on liquid staking versus having it in protocol?
I think you have a misunderstanding of what the liquid staking module does. What the liquid staking module does is it reduces the risks of having liquid staking external to the staking module. So I wrote up a document that's on that's like it's a GitHub gist. I can tweet it again, but it's in my Twitter. Of there's two core things that the liquid staking module does. That the liquid staking module does that reduces risks. So one of the big risks that everybody worries about with liquid staking is they worry that the liquid staked asset will depeg from the underlying Atom asset. And the classic example of this is like during the 3AC liquidation era. There was a 15-20% depeg of staked ETH to ETH. Now, the biggest problem with staked ETH versus ETH is that you cannot take Lido staked ETH in its current form and actually get back to ETH or like an ETH staking, or even like an ETH validator, right? The assets are actually, now this is because withdrawals haven't been enabled on Ethereum, but it's also like Ethereum is a pretty hostile protocol to liquid staking, and it has actually, even though liquid staking has become massively popular. What we're trying to do with the liquid staking changes to the staking module is make sure that there is a efficient path always from a liquid staked asset back to a staked Atom position controlled by the sort of final counterparty. So like if you are holding liquid staked, if you are, when the liquid staking module goes live and, these changes happen, if you are interacting with a protocol like Stride and Stride needs to unwind all its positions, everybody goes, all the counterparties essentially can end up back into a place where they're just like staking Atom, right? And that sort of gives you final settlement on liquid staking systems. And so this was the design. That was one piece of the design. And then the other piece of the design, which was sort of worked on in collaboration with Informal, is this kind of idea of the exemption system, which is creating delegations that cannot be settled, cannot be part of the settlement process. That cannot be easily transformed into liquid stake and then settled. And these are the idea of having this delegation system is to create a pool of atoms that are more explicitly incentive aligned with the protocol and with governance. And I think there's like some interesting research that is still to be done about what are all the properties that we can give exempt atoms. But just given the fact that all of these liquid staking protocols are launching, that they're all offering incentives for people to liquid stake their atoms, I think what we're doing with the liquid staking work that has been going on so far is actually improving the safety of the system over where we are right now.
Got it. Thanks for the explanation, Zaki.
Hey guys, good evening. As someone who's been kind of a user of the Cosmos, I guess more than anything for the last couple of years or so, kind of my observations about like the entire controversy, whether it's the Treasury, whether it's, should you increase features on, Atom in general, kind of like just the whole package. I would say, I think the worry is that currently the core way to bring liquidity into the Cosmos is Atom. And currently, we don't have a pristine collateral asset within Cosmos that's immutable. So we don't have the Bitcoin of the Cosmos at the moment. Something that you could say, for example, build liquid staking assets with, where you don't have to worry about governance because there is no governance. You have a chain that literally does nothing, and nothing ever changes. And you'd have to figure out how to keep that decentralized, and there's some formulaic things that might have to be done. But I think that's one of the problems we have right now, and why there's so much controversy. It's because there is this camp that worries that if somehow some systematic way Atom gets wrecked, then now we don't have a great way to it would wreck all of the LPs in the Cosmos in a sense. So I think that's where the paranoia comes from. And it's probably not unreasonable paranoia in some sense, right? So the whole thing has to be executed quite carefully. On the other hand, it's if tech sort of passes us by, technology moves at just a breathtaking pace, and if we don't do anything more for the Atom token, it's does it fade into irrelevance at some point? That's the other problem. So I think this is, the two major camps in a nutshell, kind of viewing it from a bird's eye view. And I think part of the reason why we're having such contentious conversations, I think, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, is because really we need that pristine collateral, highly liquid asset that can be used as a kind of fundamental DeFi primitive. I know Nomic or some other people are looking at bringing Bitcoin in, but that's still, kind of a bridged asset at the end of the day. And ultimately, I think, an IBC native pristine collateral should probably be part of the entire discussion about what we're doing. So, because I think we're stuck right now with that being sort of Atom to some extent, and I think that's what makes people the most nervous to change. Do you think you guys have any thoughts on that idea, or or am I just completely crazy?
I think probably I'll just jump in with my view of this is, when I started out in crypto, I thought that people really were looking for the sort of ideal collateral asset. And that was and I think what we have observed so far is that the collateral asset that everyone wants is a dollar-backed stablecoin. And that is by far the most desirable collateral asset that crypto has been able, that most of the parties really go for, that most of the parties are really driven, most users, what they want to do is they want to collateralize various DeFi systems with stable coins, and then earn farming rewards, borrow, lend, all of these things, and dealing with volatile assets as collateral assets is challenging. Yeah, I mean, like I said, and so I've been, and I could be wrong about this. I'm not trying to suggest that I'm right,
And I
but
think
I'm
both are.
empirically observing reality.
Yeah, I think both are important. I think from the perspective of you owning a growth asset, you probably want a pristine, unstable collateral. And the perspective of a pure stablecoin currency, there's no question there's this a high demand in the crypto space for some kind of very secure, censorship resistant theoretically collateralized, dollar-backed stablecoin of some kind. So these are like the most, I think, important products to create. And I think the issue of systemic risk comes in when, let's say, for example, let's say the Atom blockchain, was holding, let's say, $100 billion or let's say $1 trillion of the value. The you have to, I guess, think of this from the angle of like, would you make the same choices if it was that big? And what kind of attack vectors ultimately open up when the size becomes substantial enough? And I think that is something that everyone's kind of scratching their head about. Like I don't know that I've seen really, really, like, I don't know, perfect renditions mathematically of how to avoid a lot of the problems in the general blockchain space. I don't know. I think what my wish list was, if I could have it, like just put it this way, if I could have this object, it would be the sort of like the Cosmos yield bearing Bitcoin, so that you can create any number of liquid staked assets on top of it. There's no governance, so you don't lose there, because like nobody cares that you create a liquid staked asset because it can't be used to manipulate governance. And then you're on your way. And then there would have to be ways to sort of obviously decentralize the actual network, which is the hard part. And I have some theories on that, but I think this is the missing piece. And I think like until that problem is solved, I feel like there's a lot of cool shit that can happen with DeFi, but without that pristine collateral, there will always be this suspicion that I can't put more money in this thing than a certain amount without risking too much. You follow what I'm saying? So I think it curtails growth of the Cosmos without an IBC native like perfect collateral, if there was ever such a thing.
That's interesting. Does anybody have, by the way, people are free to kind of request to speak and like, please don't be shy. And anyone is welcome. Yeah, one thing
hold on.
Go ahead.
Do you mind if I interrupt?
Sure.
I think we should do a better effort at like exploring some of the more contentious issues. Exploring some of the more contentious issues that have been sort of in the Atom 2.0 discussion. Like, I think like one of the biggest and most contentious issues is this question of like whether or not the council system is centralizing to the Cosmos ecosystem. I think has been like one of the biggest and sort of most debated questions. And I'd love to get some perspectives on it. Love to have like more of a discussion about like what do you think the council system is supposed to accomplish? What are the deficiencies of governance so far? I certainly have my views and happy to talk about them.
I think we should have like a legality perspective and get lawyers into this, and more in terms of, how can this not be a target from the SEC? Because if it does look like it's being centralized, then we definitely don't want to be a target for that, right? We're preaching to be a community change for all, even though some things are better organized with a smaller group of smarter individuals, but like we have to look at it in terms of like sustainability long term on a legal perspective. Even though Cosmos is worldwide, it's still a huge impact. If it's targeted by SEC, right? And then I kind of agree with CFI in terms of the investor confidence, because as great as Atom is, it still doesn't like exuberate that investor confidence where you want to put a lot of liquidity in it, because it's, as an asset, there's that dilemma of like, if we push too many changes, then we can risk Cosmos Hub blowing up, but if we don't do enough, then we can risk it to go irrelevant. So it's more about like finding kind of the right balance, and looking at other examples in the space of what has worked and what hasn't worked, and trying to like steer direction towards what has worked.
Yeah, I mean, I think my perspective is like the reasons, these councils and these sub DAOs have been proposed is because there have been so many challenges, with the kind of existing sort of like funding organizations and their sort of like mandate and like their responsibility towards the ecosystem and like, their liabilities or like what they're willing to like sort of take a bet on and like the risks they feel that they want to be exposed to. And a lot of these things I think have been like opaque for like the rest of the ecosystem. Like not really understanding like what like the decision making kind of framework is or like so there's been a lot of challenges I think like historically that even predate like when I joined the ecosystem AIB not working on the hub sort of full time, although it sounds like they want to be doing that again, or challenges with the ICF and things like this. And so like the councils to me are like an attempt to hopefully have actually like greater like transparency where like the community is involved and there is like some sense of like directionality and like sort of intentionality on like what is being funded and like for what and like how does that kind of benefit the hub and like the hub stakeholders and the validators and delegators and so on and so forth. So like to me it's sort of like a response to the challenges with like the existing mechanisms for like having a sustainable sort of like development ecosystem and things like this. Like that's how I look at it. Obviously that's just one perspective, but I'd be curious to hear from others.
Having recently served or still serving on one funds allocation council, we have so when you're kind of allocating money to projects and things, so like there's a small group of 5 people on Terra that is responsible for emergency allocation funds for Terra version 2, and so I'm kind of happen to be on this thing, and so I got a little bit of experience over the past 4 or 5 months or whatever. And what is difficult is, well, one, this kind of work can be quite hard. There's a lot of it's also hard to do the due diligence necessary because some of us might be maybe experienced, say, for example, in business, but not necessarily in code. Some of us may be in, really like little, coding geeks, but may have very little interest or knowledge about legalities and such. I think what ends up happening is you put together a group of people, and at best you get sort of one expert in each component of it. That's assuming it's reasonably diversified. And even then, like, I'm scratching my head going, wait a minute, should I give this much money to these people? like I'm handing out millions of dollars, and am I sure that they're going to deliver what I want them to? And yeah, sure, like you could do it sort of like a contractor if you've done, I'm sorry, like a general contractor, for example, like in a commercial business has to do things like, hire electricians and plumbers and whatever. And, you hand out money in small fractions, and then you sort of see, have they done their job? And then only upon completion of the job, you finish, handing out the rest of the money and all that. It's a entire like job to sort of do all this. I mean, if you think about like a general contractor on a like commercial construction project, this isn't something that people on these councils are going to be able to do well with the kind of money we're talking about, unless it's truly a full-time job. It's a pretty big deal. And then it's like, well, if you are participating on this thing, like, do you want to be doxxed doing it? Like, what if, like the community is upset with some decision you make or whatever? Any number of reasons why, like these types of jobs sort of like, I don't know, maybe, or it's like a no good deed goes unpunished type of situation. Yeah, it's like, how do you create these, councils and such, and how can you be reasonably sure they're doing a pretty good job is, I think, a tough thing, because you're really talking about doling out quite a lot of money. And I think that's sort of like a big community concern in general is, wait, how do we know, like, what resumes are we going to provide to, serve on these councils or whatever? Who is it going to be? And that's all a big black box. And then what happens? Like a bunch of people, like maybe, I don't know, show up and lobby for these positions. And, the more money you have, in a sense, the easier it is to lobby to run for those positions to some extent. It becomes a very big political sort of thing because you're controlling so much money that obviously there are sort of like incentives that wind up being manipulated and such. And then, then the other thing is like, how do you know, like, for example, I'm on an allocation council right now and we're doling out, untold millions of dollars. And, like, how do you know I haven't taken a bribe from, I don't know, one of the protocols that we're doling money out to? Like, how could you don't know that for sure? I'm not saying that I did, but the point is, like, there's no way to know for sure. So the bigger the pool of money, the higher the probability that some kind of backroom dealings are likely to occur. So yeah, all of this stuff and finding trusted people is a very, very tricky process. And I don't know, like having even done it, and I feel like I'm a pretty honest individual in all seriousness. I don't need the money. Like, I'm already independently wealthy. None of this stuff bothers me, but I can see how, like, I don't know, this kind of power would be easy to, I don't know, manipulate certain people and whatever. So anyway, that's just my thoughts of having done this. It's actually quite difficult.
Yeah. Thank you, Sefi, for kind of being like candid and straightforward. Like I think like when it comes down to it, these are very in some sense like all of the things that you just sort of like described, like what if this scenario or what if that scenario, like, these are important scenarios, but they're very like almost like they're logistical questions or administrative in nature, right? Like, you gave it the example of general contractor, right? And like how that works in the real world. By the way, that's very similar to kind of like, how we thought of Prop 72 and funding these like, feature launch set of consumer chains, which, drove, by the way, demand for a whole bunch of other consumer chains to kind of use interchain security. So I would argue this Prop 72 has been a tremendous success, but similar idea, right? Half the, relatively small amount, right, of atoms up front for development of the consumer chain, and then the rest after the consumer chain launches, and then you're on your way, and half up front, half at completion. Like these are straightforward sort of processes that might seem trivial, but at the end of the day do prevent like bad behavior and things like this. And so
Yeah, I mean, not only are they non-trivial, but they're a lot of work. So, for
yeah.
example, and just doing a commercial real estate project is a good example. Like you have numerous like layers of protection. Like the architect literally has insurance in case something bad happens, like the roof falls down. You have other forms of insurance like general liability. So if something happens during a project, like I don't know, like a weather event and burns down your house or something. You also have things like if you have a corporation, you may have a board of directors, which may not be in the executing committee, but they supervise and make sure no shenanigans are going on to the extent that they can. And the other thing is too, like auditing. So if I'm going to build a commercial project and like 25% of the way through, or some every month or something like that, there is a person that shows up from the city. They check to see if the building's being built properly, and they know how to build a building. So like it's an auditor essentially, who knows. And then on top of that, if you borrowed money, like the bank actually sends a separate auditor, separate from the city, just in case like someone at the city could be bribed or something like that. So it's an amazing amount of like due diligence that happens, and that's just a routine like commercial building project, for example. So when you're talking about this kind of money, I think it's really important to have a fairly robust system in place to do all of that.
So this kind of stuff that Sefi is talking about is what I really feel is missing from the community fund, right? The community fund exists, it doles out money, but it basically doles out money to people who are willing to be like, hey, trust us. I think, it's like, there's this question, right? Does Atom 2.0 make Zucky more powerful in the Cosmos ecosystem or less powerful in the Cosmos ecosystem? My intention in supporting the Atom 2.0 work is to make myself less powerful in the Cosmos ecosystem, but I do intend it to make Atom like a much bigger part of the Cosmos ecosystem, and that if Atom becomes 100x bigger and not just in the Cosmos ecosystem but in crypto, obviously that makes me more powerful. But it will also make everyone else who holds Atom, and especially like there are lots of entities that hold much more Atom than I do, also exponentially more powerful. And so part of the way in which this makes, like, I think this is a way of reducing my power is like all of this like structureless nature of the Cosmos Hub today actually like makes me very powerful within the Cosmos ecosystem, right? Like I can lobby validators, I can have a Twitter space that has hundreds of people show up, I can push my point of view, and I can be like, hey, like this is what I think we should do for this like community spend proposal. And look, oh, why don't we just like increase the tax rate and then and it'll give me more money that I can lobby for. And Adam 2.0 is really a different view than this, right? It's why don't we create sort of an administrative class inside of the Cosmos ecosystem, whose job it is and whose purpose it is to maintain sort of sobriety, order. Why don't we set rules on how capital is allocated? So, sure, you can allocate, up to 10% of the treasury or the community fund for some project, but if you want to allocate more, you need to go back to a full vote of the atom holders or something like that. This is the kind of structure that I think is fundamentally, if we want to grow the community of people who are active contributors, we have to move away from this kind of structureless, orderless, sort of irregular operating mechanism that we have been operating with the hub, and turn it into a regular system. And I think, Osmosis has actually been a huge innovator in trying to make governance much more of a regular system. And I think what we're trying to do with Ad 2.0 is that we start to envision a more regular form of governance rather than this current ad hoc irregular system.
Yeah, I think what Sefi and you just mentioned, I totally agree with that. Having, of how we allocate funds, and having a proper team, whether it's an auditor, a contractor team, whether it's an auditor, a contractor, lead in the proper direction to minimize risk, and having order, as you stated. Totally agree with that.
I think it'd be important that the people who do spend time on the hub, naturally they would be probably cosmonauts or somebody who's very close within that realm. Skin in the game too might be another angle to look at it. All sorts of different little nuanced things that would make a good, quote, council member, that kind of thing.
I think that we've got enough folks in the community where there's going to be room for a good mix of paid positions and people who are experienced in the community who want to, use this as a platform to help give back or, help invest in the community. It's a great opportunity to bring more people into this group that helps determine the future of Cosmos. And I think that that's one of the things that's really gotten missed in the discussion so far, is that the purpose of Atom 2.0 is to bring more and more people into the decision-making bodies behind this, because the people who are doing it right now, we like doing it, but we can't do it forever. And this project doesn't succeed if it's the same group of people at the top over and over again. And this Atom 2.0 is really a sort of step in the direction where we're trying to bring more and more people into the project.
And honestly, the most disheartening thing of the criticism of Atom 2.0 has been this is a plan for strange love and inclusion and informal to consolidate power over the hub.
So
it has
much
just
says.
Yes, it has been so disheartening. At no point have we threatened, hey, if Atom 2.0 doesn't pass and it's not exactly the way we want, we're going to walk away. We're not going to. No, I mean, we just see that there are problems. There are so many problems. There are problems around community growth. There are problems around capital allocation. There are problems around the sustainability of Atom and its value. There's problems around the appeal of Atom to outside capital. Like, all of these problems are real, and it does seem like there's like definitely seems to be like a lot of pushback against us for talking about these problems. But like Atom 2.0 is certainly just simply at this point like mostly a saying of, hey, what if we tried to solve all these problems instead of just complaining about the fact that the problems exist?
Another thing, like I'll say, is that like kind of makes things like harder is when these like discussions devolve into like these esoteric philosophical kind of like rabbit holes, like these like are actually very practical logistical concerns, right? Like if we're talking about something like the councils and the sub DAOs, right? Like these are practical concerns. Like Zach, you mentioned osmosis has been great, Juno has been great. Like we've seen examples of like when it can work well, right? When it can be improved, when it can't work well as well, right? Like there's a lot of like data out there, so to speak, but also like at the same time not enough because we're still so early. But anyways, the point is like these are practical considerations. Like how do we prevent fraud? How do we prevent unethical behavior? Like in what you would kind of see in a more typical kind of traditional sense. Like how do we like professionalize this, right? Like these like systems of like on chain like DAO like kind of capital allocation and things like this, right? And so like when it comes down to this is actually about centralization, it's not about decentralization, right? Like I mean those are very serious that's serious language, right? Like and so you kind of like start thinking like, well, what does that mean? Like what is actually decentralization? Like what is the threshold for decentralization, or what is indeed centralization, right? Like these are like very tough things to hash out. And so when you're in this like, in the midst of it, having to sort of like go back and then be like, okay, no, actually the definition of decentralized is such, and centralization looks like this, then you kind of start missing the thing that we're trying to discuss, which are practical concerns, right? And so it becomes very emotional and becomes esoteric and it becomes challenging. And I get it, right? Like a lot of us did join for philosophical reasons and are still around because we do align philosophically with Cosmos. But the issue is that philosophy gets you community, it gets you alignment, it gets you sometimes vision, but it doesn't get you like execution on like a scale I think that is needed for like the Cosmos to like really step it up, right? And for like like the hub to be a service provider that is useful, and for there to actually be development and like ship people are so excited about interchain security. Why? It's like the first thing that is going to ship, since like that the hub is actually providing like uniquely, right? Like I'm not talking about the development of like IBC and Tendermint and SDK, which obviously are public goods, and these are things like every other project uses, but something that is uniquely kind of like for the hub. It's the first time and people are excited because we're realizing there's demand for like these kind of features. And so anyways, like all I'm saying is like to realize these like kind of like outcomes, like the success of ICS, like yeah, you need funding, you need adoption, you need go to market, you like these things take resources. These are practical considerations. This isn't about centralization versus decentralization or good versus evil. That these are literally just like day-to-day practical things. Sorry, I hope that made sense, because these things can like get confusing very, very quick.
I think one other point that sort of tacks onto this that ties into a question I heard earlier, and sorry I wasn't able to come up and speak a bit earlier, but when we're talking about these treasury DAOs and the amount of like bad actor stuff people can get up to, when the system is grounded in code, when everything is transparent, when the reason why and how you increase the position of your treasury DAO is through long-term gains and reputation, and there's no way to like out of band go steal a bunch of money, it significantly reduces the incentive to do so. And I think that a lot of the issues that we see in legacy organizations, and FTX is a great example today, where you've got people kind of cooking the books behind the scenes, that's what people worry about when they hear treasury DAO. But the mechanisms that we've built fundamentally disallow many different kinds of fraud that you see in these traditional systems. And this is like completely missed in the discussion. Yes, blockchains are supposed to help us work through trust issues. And what's not seen is the way that they do that. And that's just another point that sort of tacks on to what Yelena was just saying. So anyway.
I'm a yes voter for 82. And a lot of what CFI and Jack, you're talking about, like I guess the distrust of the allocator module. I think that that's my biggest question mark. And like ultimately, like I work in, investment management. So like I see like the process of like how funds are delegated out. And obviously like people are like creating mandates. There's teams that are checking that like for compliance. And then there's obviously like regulatory compliance and all sorts of stuff as well. But I guess I just wonder if we're going to get towards a point with like, I know that there was something in the paper about putting up collateral. So like if everyone was putting up collateral to invest on behalf of the hub, then you could have less trust in the system, kind of like a over collateralized lending protocol or something. But if anytime you get to this like under collateralized allocation module and it's based off reputation, I worry there could be some aspect of like reputationally cashing out of your position once you reach a certain point, which is, I mean, in a way, that's like what most Ponzi's are, is like people just trying to get up to a certain point where they can exit. So I wonder what we can do to stop things like that.
Okay. I want to talk about what I imagine the allocation module is primarily for. So the I don't know that in the allocation, I think figuring out a way of structuring the allocation module so that it does this effectively is a non-trivial challenge. Like I think of the allocation module as very much an R&D challenge as the scheduler is. Like these are both major R&D challenges. So what I imagine the allocation module is for is we have like two fundamental problems that we've been trying to wrestle with since the original conception of the Cosmos Hub. One component of it is it's like right now I would describe the core incentives of almost every Cosmos chain is to actually try to come and like compete with Atom to like and displace it as like the central element of the Cosmos ecosystem. Like we see this with Osmosis. I think we see it a little bit with Juno. We're going to see it, and like other chains are going to roughly experience the same incentives. Try and become the major cultural and social coordination shelling point of the internet of blockchains, or become like one of the major ones. And the allocation module is really an attempt to try and create more of a partnership between the new chains that are coming to the Cosmos, so that they see that like the hub success benefits them and their growth plans, and that they can grow better and faster by the hub succeeding, rather than that their best chance of success is actually to come and try and displace the hub. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, because this is we have like so deeply committed to this like open permissionless ecosystem, right? There are nothing of value that any chain that is launching in Cosmos is obligated to give to Atom or the Atom holders. They're not obligated to give them transaction fees. They're not obligated them to route their IBC packets via the hub. They're not obligated to put block space on the scheduler. They're not obligated to use interchain security. Like anything that we think of as accruing value to Atom holders by the principles by which we have built the Cosmos is always an opt-in instead of an opt-out system, right? And we make it as easy as possible. We've designed the whole system, say, hey, you can be integrated in this ecosystem and you don't have to depend on atom holders for any goddamn thing. This is so important. But if in a world that you created like that, if atom holders are not out there saying, hey, like, we are willing to create a long-term incentive alignment by like streaming atoms, holding assets, etc., in exchange for participating in the scheduler, participating in interchain security, using atoms in DeFi in DeFi on top of your protocol, etc. We don't have any other way of defending it. So that's another piece to the story that is important.
So while we're on the topic of the allocator, and I'm also a yes on 82, by the way, and thank you to the team for all the hard work to kind of get the proposal to this point. I know it's been a huge amount of effort, especially over the last 3 weeks with all the questions and the community discussion. Very grateful that you step up and lead in the community in the way that you've been doing. On the topic of the allocator, I've been witnessing for many years in the crypto space, VCs coming into these communities. They fund centralized exchanges. They fund, models with artificial scarcity over block space. They fund centralized kind of chains like Solana. They really like centralization. They have someone to talk to. They kind of don't get decentralization. And so I think that the allocator is a really great attempt to create an investment system that's aligned with the community, actually where the atom holders can fire the sub DAOs who are hired to do the investment decision making if they don't like the decisions, where we actually have the atom holders that are over the investment managers, as opposed to the other way around, where the investment managers kind of come in and they really don't have any alignment with the community. They're extractive, and they want to make a profit and kind of go. So I really like the allocator kind of design. I think it's a big step forward for the space if we can actually have a community-owned kind of investment function. I get that it's going to be R&D. I get that it's not going to be easy to kind of build it and prove it, but I think it's worth a try, because if we can actually start to make investments consistent with the community values of decentralization, the community values of creating public goods, etc. I think that's where we start to really develop value for the community. So that's kind of my thought on the allocator.
Honestly, I feel like I agree so much with Better Future, and I always like to take positive sentiment and think, okay, but how does it listen to someone who might be against Prop 82, right? And for the record, I'm obviously very much aligned with everything Better Future just said, and obviously in favor of Prop 82. But I think realistically, there's just a lot of cynicism, right? There is so much cynicism in our space. We're seeing quote unquote reputable, trusted players, funds that have the best of the best, researchers and traders and what have you, supposedly doing due diligence on these projects, and then you have a blow up like what we had today, and no wonder people are extremely pessimistic and cynical. If they can't figure it out, what's to say that a sub DAO can figure it out, right? But I think the crucial difference, right, is there is just public awareness, and yes, there will be public transparency if these things come to fruition. There will be an understanding of, okay, who are you, what's your project? We're seeing this with again, the consumer chain sort of process. Why do you want to be a consumer chain? What are you offering? These are projects that we can invest in as a community, almost projects like built by the community for the community. You know what I mean? And like, not all of them will succeed, right? Like, not all of them will, you know, be the top, whatever it might be. And, you know, whether it's a DEX or a liquid staking protocol or whatever, like that's not the point. The point is that there is this like, you know, surfacing of concerns. There is this understanding of like what the community, you know, kind of, you know, is interested in from a user perspective or from an investment perspective or whatever it might be, right? And so, you know, like, I feel like because like I feel like, you know, when I say the public, you know, I just mean like your average person, the public, when we see these blowups, like what we're seeing today with FTX and what we're seeing with like funds getting wrecked because they, you know, they were obviously heavily exposed and, you know, invested in not, you know, whatever, in these various ecosystems, you know, we feel like, well, we're unable to, you know, maybe therefore we don't know like how to, you know, maybe succeed, right? Because like we see these trusted players like losing like their face in the ecosystem. But I think like the difference is that because there, you know, will be more transparency, there will be more community involvement and participation. I feel like there's like less likelihood that these things could happen, and there won't be opaque processes. It's not a centralized thing like behind a back door. Like this is very much all, you know, gonna take like, you know, a lot of people's eyes on it for these things to succeed. And so anyways, like I do feel like there's just a lot of cynicism right now, just generally because of what's happening in the industry. And like, I get it. Like, I really do. That just means like we need even more transparency and accountability, more information, more surfacing of concerns, more questioning, right? And so from that perspective, like we're on track because there's been a lot of that these past few weeks.
And those are great thoughts, Helena. And if I could just add, I think that this Twitter Spaces that we're having, where we're having an open, honest, direct conversation about these things, it all starts with human relationships. It starts with transparency with one another. It starts with, you know, accountability with one another, and this community building work that's happening now here in the cosmos, you know, is the beginning of you know, starting to get these things right. It's still, you know, early days, but if we, you know, have kind of confidence and faith in one another, and you know, we have a common vision, it's amazing how far a community can go in, you know, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. If we look at how far this community has already come in the past 2 or 3 years, it's remarkable. It's at the point now where I've put a lot more faith in this community than any of the other communities across crypto, because so many of the past decisions have been good decisions, and they've gotten us to a place now where we have things like, you know, IBC and ICS and you know, the beginnings of, you know, app chains where individual teams can have liberty and freedom. It's a community process, and I think it's terrific that you guys are hosting this call. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Better Future. Another way to look at this allocator thing is the people who have spent the last 3-4 years doing all of the business development, technical implementation work to put together a network of 50 independent blockchains are saying, hey, do you want to hire us to invest in the next 200, 1,000 blockchains that are coming into the system that we've built? We want you to participate as Atom holders in the success of this system that we, the folks who were hired by the Atom holders, have helped to create. And, you know, that is like fundamentally a huge part of it. Like, I've worked very hard to build a business on top of this. I would love to bring some of that expertise back to the Atom holder distribution as part of an allocator committee if I get elected. You know, and then also the ability to bring in folks like Sethi, who has his own perspective on the ecosystem and brings in his own set of sort of projects he's passionate about. And, you know, it's an incredible opportunity. It's an ecosystem to say the folks who have been most forward, the folks who have been most ahead, let's give them access to this pot of capital as Atom holders and allow them to invest in the exciting upcoming projects. When VCs and folks talk about Atom not participating in the growth of IBC, this is what they're talking about. We as Atom holders don't directly benefit from all 50 of these zones spinning up. one way we can do that is by investing alongside these builders who are coming up in our ecosystem and building with them. And that's what the allocator is all about.
I'd love to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating conversation, and I have to apologize up front because, we're one of those chains, and we're launching on Cosmos, and we absolutely love everything you guys have done before us, but we're so heads down. I mean, we are just so running like a marathon in as fast as possible. And the only chance we get to hear about this is on the radio. I mean, basically listening to something while we're driving into the office, for the 15 minutes. And then we're just heads down and just grinding if we're at our computer or, not driving. So it's a bear. I mean, it's something that you really don't understand what you're getting into. We built a solution on EOS and Wax a year ago and successfully launched that. But we needed to take it much bigger. So we looked around and found Cosmos, and we're super excited. But I don't think people totally understand until you're in it, the level of effort and the amount of just development time and dollars and expense for all of it. When you don't have a VC, you don't have somebody coming along and just giving you all this money and paving the way. You're just paying for it out of the proceeds of your existing business. And so I apologize to all of you who are so heavily involved in all the time you spent, because here we are, could totally benefit from what I'm hearing tonight. And I'm only listening because I'm not at my computer working, I'm driving. And I'm thinking, gosh, I've really missed a whole lot. And so, I apologize for that. But we opened up our testnet on Friday, just to give perspective for those of you who aren't doing this. And my son and I, who are doing this, we spent all weekend, like from early morning Saturday all the way through Sunday, like swatting at flies because some influencer sent it to a bunch of people in one part of the world. And then we had nodes coming up like crazy. And now we have 350 nodes and everybody's trying to be a validator. We have some really good validators. I've been working in relationships, got some really good ones, some awesome ones. But just dealing with it and having to go that path to where and we only got one part of the world. If we got an influencer in other parts of the world, if we had VC funding and we had better marketing, we would no doubt have probably 20,000 people. It's almost like airdrop. If you follow airdrops, we were shocked at how fast and viral our testnet launch. Everybody can build a node today. There are just hundreds of people constantly building nodes. And how do you sift through it? Obviously, economics take care of it. When we get on mainnet and people start putting real money behind it, all these are going to just disappear, quickly. But, again, I got to go back and read everything and spend time and kind of take a step away and figure out all you guys. Have done, ahead of us. But from the perspective of a new chain, I mean, this is much bigger than I think people probably understand unless they've gone through it and done it without venture capital, just trying to scrape the money by to make it happen. So, but anyway, I just appreciate all of you.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, I empathize greatly. I remember when Zachy and I were doing Game of Zones for the first time, which was the first incentivized testnet. It was just absolutely astounding the amount of sort of feedback we saw. And since then, the whole incentivized testnet thing has become just so much bigger. And, I remember when Solana did one, and it's been kind of common practice amongst the blockchain world. Even when we did Game of Zones back in 2021, it's wild. And I think Yelena now can tell you what Game of Chains is like. So very, very much empathize with you, Mike.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know you guys are way ahead of us, and we don't want to bother anybody because we're trying just to do our own work so we don't have to, take from everybody else. But you get to a place where you're like, okay, we missed the big opportunity here, and I kick myself for it because I got e-commerce sites that are out. I got the Newsweek's food site of the year, right? They're going to do 20,000 orders a day, and our solution's supposed to be in there. It's supposed to be running right now. and it works. Our solution works. Like I said, we did last year. We built it on Cosmos this year, but we're missing out on onboarding probably a couple 100,000 shoppers because we've been spending our time just trying to scratch and claw and get through this. And thankfully, it landed where we were. And to have 350 validators, I think, is a testament to all of the engineering that my development team did for all the last year. It's running well. So, you pat yourself on the back and say, great. And then you say, what's next? And then you listen to this call and you're like, oh, crud, we're going to have funds. We're going to have, we're going to have allocation. And we're just like, okay, there's always another hill. You get over the first hill, you look, there's another one.
Just real quick, Mike, this is, we're talking about one specific Cosmos blockchain, the Cosmos Hub, the original one. This is all specific to the Cosmos Hub. This is not specific to all Cosmos blockchains. So I hope you aren't intimidated by that. Congratulations on the 350 validators. I'm glad that's going well. But yeah, this is a conversation that's just about the Cosmos Hub.
Oh, understood. I'm not trying to take from it all. I'm just saying that there was security or other ways to get the help that you're offering or looking for ICS. I think that in the future, maybe people won't take the path we did. They'll have an onboarding way early on to borrow security or release security from the hub. That's all I'm saying. It's why go through all what we've been going through if we can come into internet security. So it may not sound like it, but I'm affirming what you're working on and what you're doing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's it's great to hear like a testimonial like from like a builder's perspective that like is newer to the ecosystem. I feel like a lot of us that have been here for a while like don't like we kind of maybe sometimes get tunnel vision and we kind of like don't think about like the outside world and like what it's like for folks coming from EOS or Ethereum or whatever. Anyways, the point being that like I think this vision for the hub like invites these conversations, right? Like with the community in a very transparent public way, right? Like the kinds of pain points you just highlighted, these are things like you typically hash out, with your investors, or maybe if you're raising, like with your prospective investors or your board or whatever it might be, right? But if you have this like mechanism, like this like highly decentralized mechanism, I would argue, because it necessarily involves all validators, all atom holders to participate, and you have this mechanism of surfacing these concerns, I think that's like a really great thing. And I think it's like a pretty big contrast to how things happen right now, which is like a lot of like opaque like confusion, right? Like how did FTX blow up? Like, I keep like using the FTX as an example just because it's like such a black swan, right? Like companies fail all the time and they go down, but something as large as this, anyways, all I'm trying to say is like the more we can surface these concerns, I think the better. And so I thank you for sharing some of that, from the first perspective. So yeah,
Happy to. Thank you.
Of course, I think we have bullshitter that wants to chat. So if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for y'all. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello? All right, you can hear me? Sweet.
Sorry, go ahead. I thought you raised your hand, but maybe not.
Yeah. No, I just want to make sure you can hear me.
We also have Multivax joining. So anyways, feel free to just
hear me or no?
speak.
Can y'all hear me yet or no?
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead.
I'm very bullish on Cosmos. I wanted to ask a question, and then I started to hear y'all talking about the allocator, and that made me very bullish if I understand what it does correctly. I haven't read the Prop 82 yet, but is the allocator kind of like a crowdfunding for new Cosmos chains that's being like done through atom holders? Or can y'all explain that to me a little bit?
Hey, I'm not sure if it's just me, but I can't hear anything.
I can hear him.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna leave and join.
Yeah, I mean, like this happens from time to time with Twitter Spaces, but okay. So right now, there is no, so one of the things that the allocator module is interested in is helping provide financial incentives for hub aligned new chains. It's not the only thing that the allocator is trying to do, but it is within the scope. We have had this like very small Prop 72 effort that Yelena and I work on. I have to let Yelena back in. We have this we have this very small Prop 72 effort. It's totally not scalable, and we are trying to figure out ways of continuing to scale the ecosystem. I don't know. It's like 1:15 for me, and I feel like I want to go to sleep soon. So maybe we should do like 15 minutes, maybe, of more of this Twitter space, and then I get to go to sleep.
For sure. I'm gonna read it later. I just want y'all to know I like Cosmos a lot. When I think about all of the chains in comparison and just the community and the feel that I get when I start swimming around like the builders and people, y'all definitely are giving me the most confidence right now.
Maybe I could have a crack at kind of paraphrasing my understanding of how the allocator will work. And if anyone on the team wants to correct me, I'd appreciate that. So the way I look at the Atom 2 proposal is that it solves some of the kind of most fundamental problems in crypto. So the first problem is, how does a chain make revenue? And so, a chain like Ethereum charged gas and had artificial scarcity over the block space. But that was really expensive for users. And it was a really crappy user experience to pay so much money just to, do an NFT transaction. So the Cosmos Hub is setting up a scheduler to build revenue within the ecosystem by harvesting what's called MEV, miner extractable value. Once that revenue is captured by the hub into the hub's treasury, then the allocator can invest that revenue into community aligned projects. And the allocator will have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, I don't think it's stated in the proposal, investment management sub-DAOs. And each of the sub-DAOs will be like a little, Andreessen Horowitz or, Morgan Stanley, or I'm just throwing out those names so you kind of get, a sense that it could be, even professional investment managers that the community would hire to make investment decisions into chains within the ecosystem. And if the investment sub-DAO doesn't make good decisions, and they're going to make decisions where, it's the resources of the Atom Hub treasury being invested into these different projects. So these will be public decisions. So as these investor sub-DAOs develop a track record, and these track records will be public, the Atom community can decide, this allocator, this investment manager, is making good decisions, or this investment manager over here isn't making good decisions. So, we can nominate away from the ones that are making the poor decisions, and we can, give kind of more of a role to the ones that are making the good decisions. And basically, it's like a flywheel where the more we invest in new chains in the ecosystem, the more MEV we have to harvest, and the more revenue is captured by the Cosmos Hub. So it's kind of this positive, virtuous cycle where we go from investing in 1 or 2 of these chains to 10 or 20 of these chains to maybe eventually 50 or 100 or 1,000 of them.
If I may, just real quick, that's my chief concern with the proposal as it is with the allocators is, okay, fine, an allocator can make bad decisions, and maybe the effect is he might be removed or she might be removed from that position later on, but the damage might be done. So the question is, how do we ensure that the incentives are aligned and that there are no incentives to take wrong decisions? And the FTX, just as a very recent example, comes to serve as an example of what should not be done. So should allocators perhaps take part of their own funds so that we can ensure that their stake is in the long-term health of the ecosystem? That's my chief concern. How do we align the incentives so that allocators are making decisions based just purely on the long-term health and wellness of the ecosystem?
So
Well, I think Better Future is about to make the same point as I am. So go ahead.
you go ahead, Zaki.
So we've been thinking, in the initial ideation and development specification phase of this idea of allocations about like this like problem of like sort of nothing at stake, right? Where it's like, okay, you get yourself into one of these allocator DAO positions, and then you're able to wield a tremendous amount of power. You could use this to enrich yourself. You could use this to make bad decisions. What are all the ways that we can do this? And I don't think the system, it's not like the system that is in the white paper is not a technical specification. It is a high level set of ideas. But one of the things that it can be used for, one of the things that we do float is, yes, this idea that you have to, stake a significant chunk of atoms to participate in, if you are going to be doing one of these allocations. And ideally, you have to stake a significant amount of atoms for the entire time that you are participating in this allocation. So it could be like months or years. It could be much longer than like what you are typically staking. Because a lot of skin in the game is going to be essential to making the allocation, or like some of the functionalities, the highest risk functionalities of the allocation module work.
Zaki, is it also correct that there's a separation of powers? So the human teams that make the investment decisions are not the ones that actually transfer the tokens. There's a technical module called the allocator module, and it's the one, once the decision has been reached, that does the transfer of the treasury tokens, and in return would receive the tokens from the treasury of whichever is the target chain that's being invested in. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. These things are not multi-sigs. We are imagining a new set of modules, integrated designs that combine components that are integrated into the Cosmos Hub, and they can run on consumer chains, like potentially to use DAO, or other module designs. Like we expect there to be quite a, I think like one of the things that is people are like, oh, in many ways the allocator sounds a little rhymes with sommelier. And the way it rhymes with sommelier is that like sommelier designed a whole system to enable active management of user funds, where the active manager cannot actually steal the user funds, does not actually touch the money, doesn't have any direct access to the funds, doesn't even have the direct access to the ability to trade, but you still have this active management component. This kind of R&D is just interesting to me. It's interesting to me that we can build such systems with the components that we've built out of Cosmos. It doesn't mean that like sommelier is somehow going to be benefiting from the allocator.
A question, Zaki. the question that Bullshitter raised, was how do we align the interests of these investment management teams with the interests of the community and the ecosystem? I mean, one way is to see the investment track record and fire the ones that that aren't, creating value for the ecosystem.
I have an
The other
ideal.
way would be to incentivize them positively. So, yeah, just curious to hear your thoughts on that alignment of their interests with our community interest.
I have an ideal. And I don't know if this is the space for it. I'm happy to just like write something in the Discord or, like submit notes somewhere. If you know what I mean, if the team is open to like notes and suggestions. But the thing that I really like about Cosmos is I feel like it reminds me of Ethereum if it had the potential to be a more tight knit family. I feel like Ethereum is like the computer and everyone else is the user. And this feels more like I'm I'm looking at a bunch of people that are very intelligent and building things that are working together and have the options like they have it's primed for people to work together, whereas I feel like Ethereum it creates more of a competitive market. I feel like this is more like a family, a rapidly growing family that can all work together. um, and what this ideal makes me think about is like the common holder being able to access a certain, like maybe like a last seed round of new chains coming out through staking their Cosmos, which would, and like having maybe a multiplier going by the amount staked, so it's still respectful to the whales and to the large holders, but then also gives people who come early and people who have interest but not as much of a bag, the chance to get in early on like new prospects within the ecosystem. And the ecosystem, I feel like, already has a large respect for itself for intelligent building. So like, once again, I have a lot of digging to do. I'm looking at more than just Cosmos, but I I'm very hopeful for y'all. I do think that this has the potential to be like the chain that isn't shitting itself.
Okay, all right. That was great. I don't know how much Zachy has time left, but
I want to go
I
to
would.
sleep.
Okay.
Maybe you got maybe because like when I leave this, it'll end the Twitter space. Maybe you guys can kick off another one.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's getting late for me too. But we should do this again tomorrow. Actually, I like this idea of pass forward. Bringing together people that have hesitancies, criticisms. I honestly wish we had more tonight on the criticism side. But yeah, maybe
I
tomorrow.
tried to surface the criticisms from the governance chat. So
I know. All right. Well, it's an open invitation. Maybe, and I guess see you guys tomorrow, hopefully, to talk more about this fun stuff. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.